Alberta's ombudsman has stated that an Alberta man with autism has been unfairly denied the support that he needs by a government program that relies too heavily on intelligence tests. This story has sparked a conversation nationally about how best to support those with disabilities, including those who are working. One major hurdle for Canadians working with a disability is career mobility, and just last week, a reporter for Canadian Affairs took a deeper look into the issue. Joining us now to discuss career mobility for those with a disability is Meagan Gillmore, reporter at Canadian Affairs. Meagan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
No problem at all. And just how many Canadians qualify as someone with a disability, and how exactly is disability defined?
Sure. So according to the most recent Statistics Canada data on this, about 27% of Canadians over the age of 15 report having one or more disabilities that impacts their daily functioning in some level. And that can be a range of like mobility disabilities, disabilities related to pain, mental illness, and then things that people may more commonly think of, such as like vision loss or deafness, being hard of hearing, that sort of thing. So that's like the general scope of how many Canadians have some form of disability. Definitions of disability will actually differ if you're looking at different social assistance programs or like the disability tax credit, something like that. But in the general population, it would be 27%.
And when it comes to employment, what is the employment rate for those with a disability?
Yep. So again, this is from Statistics Canada. This is from like 2022. So it's a few years old. But for people with disabilities between the ages of 16 and 64, their employment rate was 65%. But for people in the same age range who did not have a disability, the employment rate was 80%. So there is a significant gap overall when you compare people with disabilities versus those who don't. But then when you compare individuals with more severe disabilities, and particularly intellectual disabilities, they have even less employment than people without disabilities.
And we know that Ottawa announced the Disability Inclusion Action Plan in 2022, but where does that program stand right now, and has anything really been implemented?
That is a great question that many people would like to know the answer to. So a couple things to note: the Disability Inclusion Action Plan is, in the words of the government, an evergreen document. So it is something that is intended to be refreshed and refined. So it can be kind of nebulous and hard to pin down. There's a few different key priority areas. One of the big ones is financial security and the Canada Disability Benefit, which was introduced, with more details about that were introduced in the budget last month, was a big part of it. But then there's another pillar of the plan for employment. And under employment, the government has committed to producing a disability employment strategy. And that strategy is still not released yet. A spokesperson for Minister Kalmakara, who's the Minister of Diversity, Inclusion, and Persons with Disabilities, told me that there should be more information about that strategy in the coming weeks. But right now, we don't know what it will be.
And in your conversations with experts on this subject, what have you said that needs to be done to advance employment opportunities for those with disabilities?
Sure. So they've mentioned a few things. The first one is we still need to work on recruitment practices. It's still difficult for people with disabilities to get a job. So that can range from making your interview processes more accessible. A big factor will always be the physical workplace accessibility of a place of work. But then another part of it is attitudes, right? So you can make your workplace wheelchair accessible, but if you still think that somebody who uses a wheelchair is less capable than someone who doesn't, why are they going to want to work for you, right? So there's both the physical things that need to be done, and there needs to be more work around helping people request accommodations, making sure that those accommodations stay with them as they progress throughout a corporation, but also the attitudes and the culture around how we think about disability at work.
And very quick, in your reporting, you mentioned internalizing ableism. Can you unpack that for us, exactly what that means?
Sure. So ableism is a belief that people are more valuable if they are able to do things. Or in other words, that disabled people or people with disabilities are less valuable and less important than those who don't have disabilities. So internalized ableism is when an individual with a disability starts to subconsciously think those things about themselves and think that my work isn't as good. Often a way that this can be seen, and I'm legally blind myself, so I can attest to this. One of the ways that this can be seen is the worker with a disability often feels like they have to work twice as hard as everyone else just to prove that, it was worth it for you to hire me. Because there's this narrative that, like we're a burden and it costs so much and it's so hard to accommodate you. So you feel like you have to keep proving everybody wrong, even if the people around you aren't actually thinking those things about you.
Thank you so much, Meagan.
Thanks so much for having me.